candidates, good afternoon. My name is Mr. Mhlongo, and I'm back here with you today to push economics as we prepare for our June examination. Remember, this lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Cybono Discovery. We continue with microeconomics as the focus of the day, but today we are completing microeconomics, our part of paper 2. So in microeconomics, we are covering market failures. Like I did tell you last week that today we will be covering market failures. Apologies for the information provided on the pre-presentation. It indicates regional development. Today we are covering microeconomics. Under microeconomics, we are on market failures. So please join me. Let's see what I have for you. This is the very important information for you as we are doing grade 12 economics. These are the dates that are very important for term 2. Firstly, 18 June 2025, you will be writing your economics paper 1. That simply means our lesson for preparation will be a day before on the 17th of June at the same time, same place. We'll be covering macroeconomics. What is it that we'll be focusing on for paper 1? The first one will be circular flow. Second one will be business cycles. Third one will be public sector. And the last one will be foreign exchange market. So start preparing for that examination easily. You will be revising because the content has been covered in paper 1. In our March examination question paper, as well as the, the project or assignment. Now, you will just be gathering that information together again and remind yourself what you covered last time. And then the second date is 20 June 2025. This is when we will be covering our economic paper 2. The focus area will be microeconomics only, microeconomics. So what is there? We will be dealing with perfect markets. Number 2, imperfect markets. Remember, under imperfect markets, we have the monopoly, oligopoly, and the monopolistic competition. Duopoly can come in also. And then we have market failure at last, where will be content of today. So the content we are covering today is the main content that will also be a part of your question paper in your microeconomics. The following are the lesson objectives. After this lesson, as a candidate will be understanding the following: reasons for the market failure, consequences of market failure, and the cost-benefit analysis. So we'll break down the concept of the market failures, giving the different descriptions and definitions. After that, we'll go further to mention reasons for the market failure. Then we will discuss them in detail as an essay. Then we'll move to consequences of market failure, where we'll be talking about the like of externalities, inefficiencies. Then we'll talk about the state intervention. From then we'll move to cost-benefit analysis, where we'll be focusing more on why does the government intervene by using what we call evaluation, that we call the cost-benefit analysis. What are the benefits of doing such? Why it doesn't use market forces like the private sector or the market. It is believed that you already have the following information on the markets: perfect market conditions and market structure, monopoly market conditions, oligopoly market conditions, then monopolistic competition. You are already informed about this. We have covered this together on this lesson, on these previous lessons. So the focus is on reasons for the market failure, and then we talk about the consequences of market failure, and then cost-benefit analysis. I will give you the breakdown right now. The reasons for the market failure, we are checking first, before we look at the reason, what is meant by the market failure. Remember, the primary duty of the market is to supply goods that are demanded by consumers. So should the market fail to supply the quantity of goods that is demanded by consumers, that market is failing because it is not it is unable, to meet its own primary objective, which is mainly to supply goods that are demanded by consumers. So should the market supply less than demanded, the market is failing. Should the market supply more than what is demanded, the market is failing. So the market failure can occur when the market undersupply or oversupply goods and services. Or it can also occur when the market misallocate resources in a way that goods are not produced or made available at the desired quantity and the desired quality. or the market failure can happen when the product mix does not satisfy the consumer utility. And then also, the market failure is mainly based on the misallocation of resources. Goods are not provided or supplied at the right quantity, right quality, and the right time. In that case, the market is failing because it's unable to meet its own primary objective. And then we have some reasons for the market failure, where we talk about the likes of externalities. Then we talk about also the missing markets, imperfect market structure, unfair income distribution, immobility of factors of production, lack of information, etc. They will be discussed in detail. Then we move to the consequences or the effects of market failure. In there, we talk about externalities also. So we bring them back in the form of graphs also. Remember, if we talk of externalities, we refer to charges or benefit that spill over to the third party, or that are bound to the third party, or that are transferred to the third party. So in that case, we can divide it into two types, namely, the negative externalities as well as positive externalities. If we talk about the negative externalities, we refer to the charges that spill over to the third party, while the positive are benefits that are enjoyed by the third party. In there, we give some simple examples that will be illustrated on the content here. Then we draw some graphs. Then we talk about inefficiencies, which occurs when goods are not made available at the right quantity, right quality, and right time. In there, we divide inefficiency into different types, namely allocative inefficiency. That's when available resources are not used to their optimal level. Productive or technical efficiency, which occurs when goods produced do not satisfy the consumer utility, or goods are not made available at the right quantity, right quality, and the right time. And then also we talk about Pareto inefficiency, which occurs when it is impossible to make someone better without making someone worse off. Then we also talk about efficiencies that exist in there. From then we move to, or we'll also draw the PPC and illustrate, and explain it in a form of interpretation to show points that are efficient and points that are inefficient. Then also, still on the market failure as consequences, we talk about state intervention, where we will be referring to direct control, where the government intervened by legislation to put some rules and regulation within the economy or within the market. And then we also talk about imperfect market structures, since we are fully aware that imperfect market structures such as monopoly, oligopoly, and monopolistic always behave in a manner that allows them to optimize profit at the expense of the consumer. So what do they normally do? Monopolies will always charge prices above marginal cost to keep up with their profits, and they always adjust price or increase the price to decrease the output, which can lead to inefficiency. Oligopolies are involved in price fixing under collusion, which is bad for the consumer and the economy. Monopolistic competition also focuses on product differentiation, which normally limit availability of goods and services in the market if they are basically differentiated. So that's a bad thing. Also, we know that they always have delaying tactics to adapt to the new technology because they don't want to spend more capital to produce. And then we'll be moving also to minimum wage law, minimum price, maximum prices, effect of taxes, effect of subsidies. And then we'll also talk about this redistribution of income and wealth, as well as the state intervention in production of goods and services. And then we'll move to also talk about missing markets, where we'll focus on provision of public goods and services, and then also the provision of merit goods and as well as demerit goods. We'll go further to lack of information, to say information is very important in the market because it allows all economic stakeholders to make well-informed decisions. So they lack basic information, they tend to make poor decisions and become more inefficient. And then we'll talk about also imperfect market structure, to say they always exploit consumers. They delay to adapt to the new technology. Also, they have an issue of aggressive advertising, which mainly make their goods to appear more superior than those of the competitors. Lack of information will also describe that information is very important, should not be asymmetric. Information should be common between the consumer and the producer. Immobility of factors of production will emphasize on the fact that factors of production are not easily mobile. Like labor cannot be made available in the short period of time. Like skilled labor is not always available. It takes about 4 years maximally, or maximally for one to have the skilled labor. So it cannot be supplied at the right quantity at the right time in the short term. So labor can also not be moved from one use to another. It is not also easy to mobilize labor from one work to another in a short period of time, because people should also serve 3 months notices on the jobs that they are doing, so that they can relocate to the new jobs. Also, capital cannot easily be made available at a shorter period of time. And remember, some inputs are fixed in the short run, so they cannot simply be made available. Like machines that produce are created for single-purpose use. They are not created for multi-purpose use. So for that reason, if ever we have surplus of particular machines, we cannot afford to switch them from one use to another because they are single-purpose use, so they are immobile. Talk about also the technology. As much as we need technology, but it is expensive. It takes time for the country to adapt to the latest technological trends because there must be more capital available. We talk about land. Land is not mobile. If we install the infrastructure now in the particular area, now it's no longer needed after another location where it's needed because infrastructure is totally mobile. It's a part of land. So that's what we'll be dealing with. And then when we'll go straight to consequences, then we talk about CPA or cost benefit analysis. The market failure. So market failure occurs when market forces fail to allocate resources efficiently and therefore do not produce correct quantities of goods and services at the right prices. So that simply means the market is failing to allocate resources in a way that allows them to produce goods at the right quantity, right quality, and the right time. That can lead to the market failure because should there be lower supply than expected, that will be market failure. Should that be oversupply than expected, that will be the market failure. Market failure is a result of misallocation of resources, which lead to undersupply or oversupply of goods and services. Whenever resources are misallocated, meaning they are not used to their optimal level or they are overutilized. So in that case, there can either be undersupply or oversupply of goods and services. Surplus or shortage of goods and services may prevail in the market. So if ever the market is faced by the surplus, that means firms are producing more than what is expected to be supplied by the market, which can lead to goods being, perishing in a way that they can be dumped to other countries. And also shortages can lead to consumers not to be satisfied because the product will not be available at the right quantity and right quality. For that reason, that will be the undersupply. Producers do not produce efficiently, thereby causing wastage. If ever producers are producing more than expected, some goods can be wasted if ever they are perishable. For that reason, that can be a market failure because that means businesses are unable to study market forces efficiently so that right decisions can be made. And then when markets fail to allocate resources efficiently, some market participants may benefit while others are compromised. Whenever the market is unable to allocate resources efficiently, some consumers will go without the product, which will be a market failure. And while some consumers will be having more of the product, which is also a market failure because some are getting a product, some are going without the product. So when the consumer is not satisfied by the product produced by the consumer, by the producer, there is a market failure. If the supplier supply less than expected, there is a market failure. When the market inefficient allocate resources, the desired output is not produced at the right quantity at the right time. I think this one is a repeat. Whenever resources that are available are not spent accordingly, the desired quantity will not be produced at the right quality. For that reason, there will be market failure. Some consumers do not receive the goods and services they need because of misallocation of resources. For instance, if the producer is underutilizing resources, there will be a shortage of goods in the market, which will then be regarded as a part of the market failure. Market faces shortage or surplus of some goods and services, which is regarded as undersupply or oversupply. Should there be a shortage, that's an undersupply. Should there be a surplus, that's an oversupply, which can lead to goods being wasted. Producers do not efficiently produce, thereby causing the wastage. Prices are not fair. Some consumers may not be able to afford certain goods and services. That also can lead to the market failure. If ever monopolies charge prices above the marginal cost, those prices will be unfair to the consumers in a way that they won't be able to afford the product. For that reason, that can also be a market failure because should people go or consumers go without the product they need because they are unable to afford, that also leads to the market failure we talk about in the unfair distribution of income and wealth. Market failure results to some market participants benefiting while others are compromised. I think that one is a repeat. The causes of market failure. So this one is an essay discussing in detail the following factors that lead to misallocation of resources in the market. So remember, examiner might not say discussing in detail causes of market failure, might say discussing in detail factors that might lead to misallocation of resources in the market. Those are still reasons for the market failure. There we go. Externalities: missing markets, imperfect competition or imperfect market structure, lack of information, immobility of factor of production as well as imperfect distribution of income and wealth, or unfair distribution of income and wealth. So to remember the 6 causes of market failure, you develop the simple structure, mind the gap page, and then it is in the introduction. There we go: externalities, missing market, imperfect competition, lack of information, immobility of factor production, imperfect distribution of income and wealth. So that means it is in Meili. So you can just try to have a structure so that you can always remember these subheadings. So there we go: externalities, missing markets, imperfect competition, lack of information, immobility of factor production, and imperfect distribution of income and wealth, or unfair distribution of income and wealth. Let's go straight to externalities. So these are costs or benefits that are imposed to the third parties who were not involved in the original transaction. Externalities are known as spillover effects because they are transferred from one party to another. Externalities can be positive or negative. So we'll be discussing them in 2 ways: negative externalities as well as the positive externalities. Positive externalities are benefits that are borne to third party. They are enjoyed by individuals from activities which they have not been involved. Negative externalities refer to costs or charges that are borne to the third party. They are imposed from activities which they have not been involved. If we talk about the positive externality, it can be maybe the firm comes and invests in the area, then it needs some maybe matriculants for internships, and those people get those internships. After that, they get income. As they get income, their families will be better because they will be receiving income. For that reason, their families are beneficiaries because their kids are employed by the company. So families become third parties because they were not involved in any transaction, but they are benefiting because they will then be affording to buy more goods and services. And then as for negative, the firm is in the area and burning fossil fuel. By doing so, what happens? People of the area will be infected and have asthma. Then they will have to consult doctors using their own money. So they become third parties because they are not employed by the company, they're not part of the company, but they are suffering because of the company in the area. So as they consult doctors, that is believed to what you call the cost to those people, because they have to pay money in order to be better as they consult doctors. So cost and cost and benefits concept. These are benefits concept. So you can see here we have the burning of fossil fuel. External cost occurs when goods and services are produced and the third party is negative affected. That's when now the firm is producing by burning fossil fuel as it produces goods and services. Then people of the area are infected by the pollution, then they get asthma. That is considered to be external cost. The production process that burns fossil fuel results to external cost in surroundings get negatively affected through illnesses. Private cost plus external cost equal to social cost. So what is meant by the private cost in this situation? It is the cost that incur to the business as it produces goods and services. The cost of production that as they pay for factor production is known as a private cost or internal cost. And then the cost for the consumer that we call the private cost or internal cost is the amount of money paid by the consumer to buy the product. We call that one a private cost or internal cost for the consumer. For the producer, it's when they spend to buy, to buy or to pay for factors of production. The external cost for the producer is when now they burn fossil fuel and make people to be infected in the area. While the external cost for the consumer is when they waste the used material into the environment. They litter into the environment. So that becomes an external cost now for the that particular project or in the society. We talk about social costs. Social costs negatively affect the society as extra costs are paid by the third parties at the benefit of the first parties. For instance, I've mentioned that the firm is producing in the area by burning fossil fuels, and then people of the area are infected. They are infected by asthma. For that reason, they have to pay extra costs as they consult their doctors. For that reason, now that becomes a part of the social cost because people of the area will then be infected while they are not even a part of the business. So the business benefit by making a profit, by people are suffering by illnesses. For instance, illnesses caused by air pollution result in social members having to pay an extra medical cost, which are not compensated by the first parties, which are the businesses. Firms that cause pollution do not pay for medical costs when social members are infected. They have to take care of their medical costs as social members. So for that reason, that becomes an extra cost to the third party. As the government imposes high green taxes on pollution by businesses, the cost of production per unit increases. So consequently, businesses offset those charges to consumers to maintain their profits. So if ever the government intervened by imposing high charges or high taxes or cap taxes or green taxes on pollution, firms will be increasing their costs, their selling prices, which will then be compromising consumers because they will find themselves not affording that particular product because of the increase in taxes. They then restrict the supply and charge high prices, which reduces welfare. So once they charge high prices, they then supply less. Consumers will then be affording less while they demanded more initially. That will then compromise social welfare because people will find themselves not affording the product because of the government intervention by imposing high taxes on pollution, which has caused or resulted in the increase in the selling price. Then they are no longer affording. Social benefits. Social benefits are some of private benefits and external benefits. Remember, if we talk about private benefit, we also refer to the internal benefits. So if we talk about private benefits for the business, that is about revenues or profit enjoyed by the business after sales. If we talk about the private benefit for the consumer or internal benefit for the consumer, that's a satisfaction gained by the consumer when they utilize the product they bought in the market. Well, benefit equal to the private benefit plus external benefit. So whenever we calculate social benefit, we say social benefit equal to private benefits or internal benefits plus external benefits, then we get social benefits. Large infrastructure projects are create employment opportunities in the society and result in poverty relief. That can lead to what we call the social benefit, because as people are employed, they earn income to afford their lives, or to afford their basic living, which will improve their lives as well as the living standard. Direct investment and fosters development in communities. Many firms improve rail and road infrastructure to fasten distribution channels, which make it easy for consumers to access goods and services. This results to improvement of community roles, which benefit social members as the third party. So whenever the government intervenes by improving the road infrastructure, social members as third parties also benefit in there. As much as government wants to channel goods and services easily from one place to another, but people of the area will be benefiting because they will be able to travel easily without any potholes in their roads. Same thing applies when the state intervened by building the stadium in the particular area. The aim is to ensure that if ever there's a certain event, attendance can be able to be accommodated easily, as well as the sport can also be able to be facilitated easily. However, people of the community will be benefiting because after the event, the stadium will not be taken away. People of the area will be benefiting through well improved infrastructure. We call that what we call the benefit also. Then we go to the missing market. Missing market, so we move now to what we call the second one, which is the missing market. Remember, the primary duty of the market is to supply goods and services. All goods must be supplied by the market. But if ever a certain portion of goods is supplied by the government, then the market for those goods is missing. It's not available in the private sector. For that reason, we say there's a missing market. That's why we talk about public goods and services. We say public goods are not highly rated by the market because people are not willing to pay for them. They're undersupplied by the market, and then being supplied by the government as public goods and services in a way of collective goods and community goods. For that reason, the supply of those goods is missing in the private sector or the market. So we say there's a missing market. Missing market is the situation where demanded goods and services are not supplied by the market. Missing market normally arises in relation to public goods rather than private goods. So public goods are provided by the government. So in that situation, the market is unable to supply those goods and services because those goods are not highly rated by the market. At the same time, people are not willing to pay for them. Market is incomplete without the provision of certain goods and services. It is therefore bound to fail whenever the market is unable to supply some public goods and services. So remember, the market have to supply all goods. But if the market undersupply those goods, the government intervene by supplying them as public goods and services if ever they're important for the wellness of the society. Then public goods. Public goods include community goods, which are goods such as defense, police services, prisons, street lighting, yes, flood control, stormwater, lighthouses. These are the examples of community goods that are provided free of charge to everyone in the society, and these goods are believed to be indivisible. So why does the market undersupply or do not supply these collective goods? Because like we talk about the street light, it is not easy for one to measure satisfaction gained by the consumer in there. And also they are indivisible. The consumption by one person does not affect the consumption by another person. The street light will be on for everyone. Even if you did not pay for the lighting of it, you will be getting the benefit. So there is no use for the market to supply that particular product, because everyone will benefit even if he or she did not pay for that particular service. Collective goods are goods such as city parks, bed facilities, street lights, streets, pavements, we call these ones toll roads or e-tolls, pavement roads, bridges, public transport, sewage systems, wastage removal, refuse removal, etc. These are goods that are provided by the government to everyone that is willing to pay for them. So, what separates these collective goods to community goods? It is the fact that collective goods are provided through user charges. There are some penalties or user charges that are imposed by the government on the provision of what we call of collective goods, like a toll road. If ever you are driving on the road where there's a toll gate, you have to pay. There is no other choice. But if you are not willing to pay, you use another road that does not have the toll gate. So for that reason, people that are willing to use these goods will have to pay for them, what we call user charges or penalties or levies also. Why are these levies imposed on these goods? It is not because the state wants to receive the profit, but it is because the state wants to get some revenues to maintain this kind of the infrastructure to last even for longer, not because the state is willing to enjoy the profit. So you can see street light in there is passing. Do we pay for the street light? No, we don't pay for the street light. We pass in there free of charge. So it's a part of what we call community good, because we're able for everyone freely. So it's an example of community good. And then let's check again. We continue. Then we continue with, I think we are going straight to merit goods. There is a technical error here on my device.
I want you to ask yourself.
So, post. Okay. It's just even my finger. Not
Excellence is striving for your best. Whenever you have a particular project, test, homework, uzibuze, ask yourself, is this my best? Can I put in more effort? Excellence is striving to be in the top 1% of the area in which you are gifted. And so I challenge you, in every single thing that you do, in every single area that you're gifted in, whether it's sports, it's academic, ucula, whatever that gift is, strive for excellence.
Okay, candidates, sorry about that, we are back online now. So we are continuing with the public goods and services. So in there, the provision of public goods and services is in high demand, but they are often undersupplied by the market. So we know that public goods and services are highly desired for the wellness of the society and our communities. However, the market is underrating these goods and services, so they are then supplied by the government. They are capital intensive and yield very little, if any profit. So they tend to be not profitable to businesses because some people do not pay for them. For that reason, the state intervened to supply them because the market decide to undersupply. If you can check water supply, water is supplied mainly by the government in South Africa. The private sector is there, can supply, but it will always undersupply water if ever it has to. That's why then the state intervened by supplying water collectively. So for that reason, that's why we say they tend to be less profitable. And then they are then supplied by the government because firms do not produce the product that is not highly profitable to themselves. Private sector will not withhold public goods and services for non-payment and is therefore reluctant to produce them. If ever people are not willing to pay for them, For that reason, the market will not be supplying those goods and services. It will only supply goods that people are willing to pay for them. Satisfaction gained from the use of public goods and services cannot be measured by private sector. It is difficult to measure satisfaction gained by what we call by the consumer. For instance, we talk about education. Satisfaction gained by education differ from a person to person and from a situation to situation. As much as they charge a lot of money under private sector, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that if you go through that particular education, you will be successful. So it is uneasy to measure satisfaction gained by the consumer on the use of those public goods. So characteristics of public goods, they are non-rivalry. Consumption by one person does not reduce consumption by another person. If we stand on the street light, if we are all there, satisfaction we receive is similar. Even if we come and be even more than before, that is not going to comprise satisfaction we are getting. Non-equitability, consumption of a service cannot be confined only to those who paid for it. This leads to the free riding problem. So these goods are made to be available for everyone, even if you don't pay for them, but to access them. For that reason, the market decides to undersupply or supply nothing on those goods. Public goods can cause market failure because the free market does not want to supply these goods and services. The market is not willing to supply these goods and services. It supplies less of these goods, so they are undersupplied if they are being supplied. For that reason, the state can intervene to provide them as what we call as public goods. Public goods are not provided by the price mechanism of market forces, demand and supply. So they are provided through what we call user charges, while some of them are free of charge. Social benefit outweigh what we call private benefit. So there are more social benefits over the private benefit. So society gains more from provision of public goods than what is the cost of producing them. Non-rejectable, so you can't reject them. So individual cannot abstain from using these goods and services. E.g., street lights and traffic lights are made available for everyone. You don't want to use it, but you will still end up using it because whenever it's working for everyone. Merit and demerit goods. So while market is willing to supply both merit and demerit goods, it tends to undersupply merit goods and oversupply demerit goods. Why? Remember, merit goods also are some of those goods that are beneficial to the entire society and people are not willing to pay for them. We talk about education, healthcare, and defense force. The reason for this is the fact that the market only takes the private costs and benefits into account and not the social benefits or cost to the account. Merit goods have less benefit for the market because people are not willing to pay for them. Demerit goods have the greater benefit for the market because people are willing to pay for them, even though the state intervened by regulating their supply because they are harmful in the society. So they are being oversupplied, but mainly in the black market because the formal market is regulated from supplying these goods and services. So they tend to undersupply. Then there will be creation of black markets because of the supply of what we call, because of the demand for demerit goods. Merit goods are goods that society deemed, that socially deemed, deemed good for us, since an increase in its use increases the welfare of the nation. Should we use merit goods, we tend to be better off. For that reason, they are very important for the wellness. Some goods that are highly desired for general welfare of people in the country are not highly rated by the market. So the market tends to supply less of these goods and services, but they are very important for the wellness of the country or the nation. So they tend to be undersupplied because for that reason, people are not willing to pay for them. And then the state tends to intervene and supply them as public goods and services. Market forces do not reflect the full value of merit goods because the market only considers the private benefit and not what we call social benefits. In a market system, the private benefits that consumers get from merit goods would determine what the consumer is willing to spend on these goods. So if you can check, you provide education, then one can go for private education and pay a lot of money, but after all, they don't become successful. So the satisfaction gained cannot easily be measured. That's why then the government intervened by providing these goods and services, because the private sector does not consider, or the market does not consider the social cost, social benefits and social cost. It only consider the private benefit and as well as the private cost. We continue. If people had to pay market prices for these goods, relatively little will be consumed because people are not willing to pay for them, and also they become relatively expensive. Like we talk of education, healthcare services, as well as defense force. Merit goods are profitable enough to be produced by the private sector. However, they are only produced for those who can afford them, and therefore supplied in the inefficient quantities, meaning they supply less because they know that not everyone is willing to pay for them, since they only pay goods for those who can afford. They don't consider to produce goods for non-payment. In this sense, the market will then be failing. For this reason, the state provides merit goods instead of or addition to private provision. Examples of such are education, healthcare, skill and training, as well as the defense force. They are examples of merit goods. And then demerit goods. We said these are goods that are harmful into the society. They contain negative externalities. We talk about the lack of cigarette, firearms, alcohol, etc. I think it will be given here. Demerit goods are goods that are harmful into the society. They only contain negative externality. Example of demerit goods include cigarette, alcohol, and non-prescription drugs. Some drugs require prescriptions so that they can be given because they are dangerous if they are overconsumed. For that reason, they cannot be oversupplied. The government should regulate their supply. In a market economy, these goods are overconsumed. People demand more of these goods. For instance, cigarette is it's addictive. Alcohol also have the same problem, it's overconsumed. And then drugs are also overconsumed. So for that reason, these goods are highly rated by the market. They are overrated by the market, but they are undersupplied because of the state intervention to regulate their supply. Some consumers might be unaware of negative externalities caused by the consumption of demerit goods. However, the state intervenes by ensuring that firms show the negative effect of product, especially demerit goods, on the packaging or on the web page of the product, so that as consumers buy the product, they are fully informed of negative effect of that particular product. The price does not reflect the product's external cost. The product cost the society more than its selling price, because you pay the price and also there will be negative impact, which will mean you have to pay more for consultations if you are getting sick because of cigarette. Government can ban their consumption or reduce by means of taxation and regulation by providing information about their harmful effects. So that's why I said before, the state ensure that demerit goods, what information on demerit goods is indicated on the packaging or the web page of the product. Negative effects are also provided, like cigarette is given that it's addictive, and also it's not for sale to people under the age of 18. Those are part of things that are very important as a part of information for the consumer to utilize the product. And then also, if we talk about the government intervened by regulating the supply of these goods. For instance, alcohol can be advertised at certain times on television and on radio because of the state regulation. Also, it cannot be advertised in public places like the beach side. It cannot be advertised in there, because should it happen, that will mean they are encouraging people to drink in those particular areas, which that context is not suitable for that particular kind of the product or demerit good. Also, the advertisements for cigarette in South Africa was banned some years ago. It is not allowed to advertise cigarette because it can attract the attention of people that are not ready to consume that particular product. For that reason, that is state regulation trying to ensure that these goods are undersupplied. Some drugs are illegal in South Africa. They are not supplied in the formal market. And then also, some drugs need what we call a prescription. Then we talk about firearms as a part of demerit goods. They are not simply provided. There must be licensing. If you want also to open maybe the pub or the tavern, you must also own the license. For that reason, that means there's more regulation by the government. But what is the effect of this regulation? It results to the creation of black market. These goods will then be sold under, illegal or informal under the black market. To reduce consumption of demerit goods, government imposes high taxes and force suppliers to deliberate on effects of using them. This, however, does not reduce consumption of demerit goods, as they are addictive. So we continue. For instance, public smoking is prohibited in South Africa, while alcohol should not be for sale to those who are under age of 18. So the state creates awareness on consumers about the consumption and of demerit goods. For instance, all cigarette packs have warning of harmful effects of on its consumption. So for that reason, people will buy it being fully informed about the effects. You can see we have the likes of firearm here. It is not easily provided. There must be licensing, there must be testing that will go on. A lot should go on before a person can be given a licensing to own. Cigarette cannot simply be advertised. People are not also allowed to smoke in the public place. Alcohol also have some regulations that are put in place, especially on advertisement, and the age range is also put into consideration. Then we move to imperfect competition. Before we go there, it is important for you to know that public goods are undersupplied by the market because at times people are not willing to pay for them. They are highly rated. They are highly rated for the welfare of the society, but it is difficult for the market to measure consumption gained by the consumer because it only considers the private cost and private benefit. It does not consider the social cost and social benefit. So for that reason, public goods are then supplied by the government. So we say the market is missing for these goods because the market has an objective to supply all goods and services. But then if it cannot provide some public goods or some goods and services, then they become public goods and supplied by the government. Then we say the market is missing for those goods within the economy. So that's when we talk about collective goods as well as community goods. Remember, collective goods are provided through user charges, while community goods are provided free of charge. They are known as free riders. And then we talk about merit goods, which are beneficial into the entire society, and they are provided by the state because the market undersupply them due to the fact that they are underrated by the market. As much as they are important for the wellness of the nation or society, but people are not willing to pay for them. Demerit goods, those goods are very harmful into the society, but they are highly rated by the market price and restrict output, which result in the shortage of goods and services, and that will be causing the market failure. We know that monopolies will always charge excessively high prices so that they will keep up with their profits. For that reason, that will lead to people not affording that particular product. Then there will be an undersupply of the product, while people are willing to demand more, but they don't afford the product, meaning goods will then be produced for those who can afford. Remember, imperfect market do not create a room for price negotiation. If ever you don't afford the product, you go without the product. Only those who can afford will be getting a privilege to obtain the product. Oligopolies use restrictive practices through coercive behavior and fixed prices. They do price fixing. So they use anti-competitive behavior so that they can dominate the market through collusion. So they collude by fixing prices as well as production techniques so that they can keep up with their profits. That becomes a challenge because it minimizes the consumer choice. It also blocks the end of new business because as business become the cartel, they then dominate the entire market, meaning smaller businesses that are willing to come in will have less say or less stake in the market. Then market dominance become an issue in this situation. We continue. Imperfect market do not allow for price negotiation between buyers and sellers. So the consumer will go without the product if ever he or she is not affording the product. For that reason, people will not be satisfied by the product. If they cannot afford, they cannot obtain the product. This results to consumers having to pay full amount of product or go without the product if they cannot afford. For that reason, they will be having a gap of not affording the product, so they won't be satisfying their utility at the right time because of unaffordability, due to the fact that firms are not open for price negotiation. At the same time, firms are charging excessively high price because they want to keep up with their profits. And then also monopolistic competition, what do? They deal with the product differentiation and also branding to make their goods appear unique from those of the competitors, and that limit the supply of the product because it is only available from one supplier. That become a challenge in the market because product differentiation makes goods to be unique from those of the competitors, even though they satisfy the same utility, but they are differentiated, so they appear being different from each other. Then there will be under supply of the product, even though there will be a greater demand because one supplier then is responsible to supply that particular product. Not all suppliers can do. Advertising promotion also normally promotes specific goods and services, and they appear being superior than those of the competitors that appear being inferior. So should we advertise aggressively under imperfect market, goods will appear more popular to the consumers and superior. Those of the competitors will appear being inferior, then they won't be demanded in the market. This creates a platform of certain producers having to have market dominance and thereby enjoying the bigger market share. So since others cannot afford to advertise their product properly because they have less revenues, this will create an issue of market dominance because those that can advertise, that have more capital, they advertise aggressively to make their goods appear more superior than those of the competitors. Then consumers will be informed about the one that can be advertised. That the one that cannot be advertised will then not be demanded, which will then create market dominance, and then these firms will be exploiting consumers because they dominate the market. We continue. Barriers to entry limit competition and allow market dominance. If ever there are high barriers to entry, like in monopoly and oligopoly, that limit the market entry, and that will lead to market dominance by few firms, which will then take an advantage over consumers by charging excessively high prices while they are restricting their output size. This results in consumer exploitation to high prices and shortage of goods within the market. So goods tend to be undersupplied because if firms increase their prices, they tend to lower the output size, then the product will be undersupplied in the market. Natural and artificial barriers to entry benefit certain businesses as they maximize their revenues on the absence of competition. Remember, once there are barriers to entry, smaller firms cannot afford to enter the market. So if they are unable to enter the market because of natural barriers to entry or because of artificial barriers to entry, then existing firms will be enjoying market dominance and also be exploiting consumers. So they will be making high level of profit at the expense of less competition. Delays on adopting modern technology or production techniques is normally a challenge because business will always delay to adapt to the new technology because they want to keep on maximizing their profits. For instance, right now in South Africa, we have what you call electrical vehicles that are already available. However, the market is not willing to adapt to it. It keeps on using what you call the burning of fossil fuel because they want to keep on maximizing their profits. Business tend to be less innovative under imperfect market because they are not pressured by competition. For instance, monopolies. Is there any need for monopolies to be highly innovative? No, because they don't have any high competition. They are faced by limited competition or no competition at all. For that reason, monopolies cannot get any incentive to be innovative or creative because then they are the only suppliers of a particular product which is unique without any competitor. Remember, the competition will push you to be more innovative, but without the competition, you will never choose to be innovative because there's nothing that is pushing you. The lack of information. So lack of information occurs when consumers and producers do not have adequate or complete or enough information that is necessary based on the market, in the market. So what is the impact of lack of information? It results to them making improper decisions as they demand goods and services. Incomplete market information results in inefficient use of financial resources for both consumers and producers. For instance, should the consumer lack information about the pricing of the product, they can be exposed to price discrimination. Should the consumer be unaware of the market where they can find the product, they will be moving around the city looking for the product, wasting their time, wasting their resources or revenues. For that reason, they will tend to be inefficient. Should producers not be aware of the market where they can find cheap factors of production, they tend to use expensive ways of production, which will lead to inefficiency. So that's why we are saying incomplete market information can lead to high level of inefficiency in the market for both consumers and producers. This is a common problem in the market for second-hand goods, where consumers may not be aware of the market price and pay more than necessary because, as for second-hand goods, that depends on the value of the product. Market information is an important aspect because it ensures consumers and producers efficient and also they make well-informed decisions about demanding the product. Asymmetric information it occurs when one party has more information than another party. We call this one a principal agent information. So it's a principal agent information. That's when one party has more information than another party, which can lead to other parties being exploited to high prices through the price discrimination because they are not fully informed about the prevailing market condition. It is very important for consumers and producers to be fully informed about pricing, the nature of products sold in the market, the target market, the market where they can find cheap factors of production. That is important for them because they can be efficient. We continue with lack of information. So for consumers, although advances in technology increase amount of information to which people have access to, they obviously do not have the perfect information. So consumers might not know that the price of product is lower from some other suppliers or about the harmful effects of certain products. So they will be buying the product because they are not fully informed. Consumers need a comprehensive information about goods and services they purchase in order to maximize their utility. If ever they have incomplete information that can make them making uninformed decision or less informed decisions, which can lead to them becoming more inefficient because of the fact that they are not fully informed about the nature of the product, ingredients used to make the product, the pricing of the product. Remember, if the pricing is unknown, one can charge any price of his or her choice. When suppliers give incomplete information to consumers, the agent principal information occurs because suppliers have more information than consumers, which is then known as an asymmetric information. Entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs need a comprehensive information about factors that could impact supply of their goods. For instance, they need to know where they can find affordable factor of production like capital, land, as well as what you call they apply to the wrong target market. That will lead to them not having any sales on the day because they are selling to the wrong audience or wrong target market. When producers have an incomplete market information, they might keep on using expensive means of production while cheap means of production are available. But because they are not informed, they keep on using expensive ways to produce goods and services. What about employees? Workers need a comprehensive information about employment opportunity in order to make informed decisions. They must know if ever there's a job being advertised, they must know where to find job advertised so that they cannot be scammed. Number two, they need to know the salary that they will be earning if they commit themselves to the job. They need to know the risk of the job before they commit. So that is called a comprehensive information. To avoid the issue of being committed, after all, you wait for salary, you don't get any income because you are paid on commission while you thought you will be paid on the basic income. So it is important for employees or workers to have enough information about the prevailing market conditions. Employees may not be aware of the risk and benefits of particular job if they do not have a complete information. Remember, some jobs are having some risk. Some jobs are having some benefits. So it is important for you as an employee to obtain adequate information in those factors before you commit to the job. Because should you have incomplete information, you will find yourself being inefficient in production. For instance, you want to be maybe a firefighter. In that situation, you must know that the job is risky. You must know the risk of the job, because should there be a burning fire in the particular flat or building, you must be there to rescue people and rescue the flat. So you can't say you are not going there because it's dangerous while you committed yourself. You need to know the risk of the job before you commit yourself. You need to know the level of income that you can earn. You need to know if they are operating on weekends or they are not, so that if you have to go in on weekends to work, you don't say, I'm not going there, I don't work on weekends, while the information in there says you have to be there on weekends. So that is important for workers. Complete market information therefore necessary for all economic participants or stakeholders so that they can benefit at another party's disadvantages, and also they can make informed decisions. Then immobility of factors of production. So immobility of factors of production can be described as the ability of factors of production to relocate from one point to another or from one market to another. We know that factors of production cannot easily move from one place to another. It becomes more challenging for them because you talk about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, it tends to be very difficult for it to switch from one use to another. If a person is an expert on the particular industry, cannot switch to another industry because he or she is not fully informed as for skill that he is having. Also, we talk about like the capital. Capital cannot be produced for multi-use, it's produced for single-purpose use. So if ever we have the density number of machines in the particular aspect, we lack others. We cannot simply turn from one use to another because they are not mobile. Labor cannot simply be moved from one place to another in a shorter period of time because of some family ties. So that becomes a challenge. It also reflects inability to change resources such as equipment from one use to another. Like I've mentioned, you cannot change the use of equipment from one use to another. It is produced for single purpose. For the market to be able to make efficient use of resources, it must be able to transfer resources from one use to another. We have more photocopying machines, then you don't need more of them. You cannot turn them to be to another use. So for that reason, the market will then remain inefficient because at times you have surplus of capital goods of some nature that are not used enough. So you cannot change them from one use to another. Most markets do not adjust rapidly to changes in supply and demand because most resources are not very mobile. It tends to be difficult for the firm to obtain a particular machine that is required. Sometimes you find that there's a new machine that is available in the world to produce a particular product, but it is not yet available in South Africa. People can see it on social media, but it's difficult to transport it from one country to another. So that means the factor of production as a capital tends to be difficult for it to move from one place to another. Tends to be difficult for it to move from one use to another also. Then labor splendor. Labor may take time to move into the new occupational and geographical area to meet the changes in consumer demand because of family ties. If you want me to move from Gauteng to another province now for this job, it will be difficult for me to move like tomorrow because I have to serve I have to serve this period that we have to, the 3-month period, while they're still looking for my replacement. Number two, I cannot be moved today and go today because I have the family that I have to take care of. I can't just move easily. And I cannot be switched from being a teacher to be a nurse or doctor because I'm not qualified to be a doctor. Relocation of labor from one area to another is problematic because of family ties, school, housing, etc. And then workers are reluctant to change to another job because it becomes risky for them. In order to relocate, the worker must give notice, must find a place to stay in other geographical areas, also must find the school for his or her own children at the time so that they will all be accommodated. The supply of skilled labor cannot certainly be increased in the short run. It takes time to upskill employees to be better. So for that reason, you can't leave your matric today, tomorrow you come as a medical doctor. You are unskilled at the time. So supply of skilled labor take time to be ready for being used in the labor market. This means supply of labor will not be always meet the demand for it, thereby causing the market failure, because as the market demand more of skilled labor while there's less, then it will take about 2 to 4 years to have that skilled labor, then the market, it can be supplied. So there will always be the undersupply of skilled labor of some nature, because it takes time for what we call for labor to be ready for usage, because of take time to upskill a person from being unskilled to be skilled. The capital. Physical capital takes time to relocate from one place to another. Infrastructure does not move at all. If you want to relocate maybe railway in a particular area to where it's desired, you cannot move it. So for that reason, infrastructure takes time to be installed, but also cannot easily be moved from one place to another at all. It cannot be moved. Once you install infrastructure, you keep it there. If ever it's unwanted, it will crack, but you cannot take it to another place. For instance, a business might have a world-class offices in Gauteng, but later decide to relocate to Mpumalanga. Relocating to Mpumalanga will require a business to build new offices while it have unused offices in Gauteng. For that reason, the business become more inefficient because it does have the smart offices in Gauteng, but cannot take them to Mpumalanga. For that reason, capital cannot be moved from one place to another. The land cannot be moved from one place to another. Then they become more inefficient. Machinery takes time to relocate from one place to another, and it's expensive. For that reason, it takes time for the firm to accumulate the capital to purchase the machine. So once it's available, it cannot easily be moved from one place to another. Physical capital takes a long time to install. Also, it then lasts for a longer period, but cannot be moved to fit the change in demand. Let's say the railway is no longer demanded in this particular section of Gauteng. It is demanded in another section. Can we move it? We cannot move it from this place to another location because, like on its nature, cannot be relocated. That's immobility. Capital used in nuclear power station cannot easily be converted to use in hydroelectrical plant. So that means it is produced for single purpose, not multi-purpose use. For that reason, capital cannot be moved easily from one place to another and from one use to another. Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship can also be immobile since entrepreneurs develop skills and expertise of specific industries. If ever you are good in mining industry and you have been trained for that, you cannot simply move to another industries because we have not been trained for such. So entrepreneurs are trained to have skills in the particular aspect of their job so that they become expertise. If ever there is a job that do not relate to their expertise, they cannot move to those expertise because they are not qualified, they are not having relevant skills. For that reason, entrepreneurs cannot switch from one use to another, or from one industry to another, or from one skill to another. So it becomes immobile. As a teacher, I remain a teacher until I will be, until I'm qualified to become something else. So I'm qualified to be a teacher. I cannot switch to be a nurse because I've never attended any course for being a nurse or a doctor. For that reason, I cannot switch from one use to another as a part of the job. And business people cannot switch. If ever you are good in hospitality industry, that's your expertise. You cannot switch to industrial base. You cannot switch to maybe the industries like maybe agricultural industry because there is nothing for you in there. We are only good on the offering services somewhere else. You cannot move to to agriculture or farming because you have no skill in there. You will be causing damage if you go there. For that reason, entrepreneurs tend to be difficult for them to switch from one use to another because of skills and training they have obtained. For example, a marine biologist owns a successful business to teach people in the fishing industry. This entrepreneurial skill can only be used in coastal area, not in other areas. Technology as a part of factors of production in this situation. Technology may change, for example, using robots instead of labor. It, however, takes time. For instance, we know that industries have created a robot, but it takes time to install them and to be familiar with them. So It, however, takes time for industries to adapt because restructures are not what is best for the consumer. They produce less quantity while consumers demand more, or they produce more quantity while consumers demand less. That is the part of allocative inefficiencies. This means that the product mix does not reflect consumer taste, and therefore resources are not allocated in the right portion. So if ever the producer does not allocate resources accordingly as they mix for the product, that can lead to the consumer to be less or not satisfied for the on the use of the product because of allocative inefficiency. Supply does not correspond with the consumer demand. We demand more as consumers, they supply less. That's allocative inefficiency. Productive or technical inefficiency so occurs when business does not produce optimal output according to the inputs available. So there are more inputs that are made available, but producers are producing relatively less than available inputs. We call that what? Productive inefficiency. More resources are used to produce fewer goods and services. So in that case, we have more resources available, but we are producing relatively fewer goods and services. This is known as productive inefficiency caused by allocative inefficiency because we poorly allocated our resources at first, which has led to us not producing the desired output or goods and services. Resources are not used appropriately to produce the maximum number of goods at the lowest cost and the best quality. That is productive inefficiency. There is a room to reduce costs without producing fewer goods, without producing fewer goods or without lowering the quality of goods and services. This one is indicated on what we call on the PPC, whereby the firm can be able to increase the output of a particular product between product A and B without compromising another product. Then the production possibility curve is the one that is used to indicate inefficiencies. Both productive and technical inefficiencies are well explained through the PPC or production possibility curve. So the PPC or production possibility curve is the curve which shows various combination of the amount of two goods which can produce within the given similar resources. So you are given a certain amount of money to produce two goods. You have to divide that particular resource or that particular capital into the way that you can be able to produce both goods in the market. PPC is concave to both axes since it shows the combination of goods on the vertical and horizontal. It is not convex, but it is concave. So if we say it is concave, meaning it is facing both axes, horizontal and vertical axis. The increase or decrease in any two products is shown along the axis. Remember, in there we also have what we call indifferent curve, which is convex now. Then we have our vertical, horizontal. Then we have bands on vertical, rolls on horizontal. There is our PPC. Then we indicate point inside the PPC, which is D, and then there is point A, point B. Then we continue the point on the PPC. That point is very important. I will tell you now what is important, and it's in tangent to what we call the indifferent curve, which is indicated to be FF. And then there's a point outside the PPC, which is point E. This point is unaffordable. We cannot afford to produce it outside. So let's start. The point inside the PPC is allocative and productive inefficient because we have enough resources to produce, but we are producing relatively less in this situation. And then all points along the PPC indicate that we are productive efficient. However, the point that is mainly allocative efficient in there is point C because it is in tangent to the PPC. So let's check the graph explanation. The PPC represent AB, which is here A and B. And then at point A, the business is only, the business is only producing buns. That is A with buns. And then B, rolls are produced. And then the point D inside the PPC, this point here, indicate those are not optimally used. They are not used to their maximum level. They are underused. It therefore depicts allocative and productive inefficiency. So in this situation here, resources, we have more money to produce, but we are using less money. For that reason, we are not going to be able to produce at the highest level of our output because we are underusing our resources. So this reflects allocative inefficiency, which will lead to also productive inefficiency because should consumers demand more of this particular product, less will be made available in the market due to underutilization of resources. Point C on the PPC indicate productive efficiency and allocative efficiency as it touches the indifferent curve. Point D outside the PPC is unattainable. We cannot afford to produce here. Less resources are available to produce at point E. But to emphasize here, point C is mainly allocative efficient. It means that the firm have used its resources optimally across both the products, buns and rolls. But any point along the PPC indicate that the firm is productive, efficient. Pareto inefficiency. Pareto inefficiency refers to the situation whereby resources cannot be allocated to make one person better off without making someone worse off. So if we talk of Pareto inefficiency, we did this one in the public sector. It occurs when it is impossible to make someone better without making someone worse off. Pareto efficient does not necessarily mean fair allocation of resources. Pareto improvement takes place when resources are allocated in a way that makes one person better without making someone worse off, meaning there is no compromise. Then we go to externalities. So these are externalities. So describe the following with the aid of well-labeled graphs, negative and positive. So we go negative externalities. So the consequence of negative externalities are that they reduce the social welfare. Whenever we have an issue of negative externality, there will be loss of welfare. There will be deadweight loss for the society. Like if ever there's a burning of fossil fuel in the area, people will be affected negatively by air pollution. That will compromise the wellness of the society. The thing that contain negative externalities include exhaust gas pollution, tobacco, smoking, and alcohol abuse. They contain the negative externalities, so they deprive or welfare gain. They cause welfare loss or deadweight loss. They lead to deadweight loss. Part of the external cost associated with the use of such items is not paid by the producer, but is paid by the society. I think this has been explained in our initial part of externalities. There is a definite link between air pollution and the range of illnesses. So if people are affected, they are sick, the company that is burning fossil fuel doesn't pay for people that are sick, but they have to pay an extra charge, which causes the negative externality. Treatment of these illnesses is extra cost to the public. It's paid by the public itself, not by the business. Should the cost associated with the negative externality be considered, it will result to producers' cost increasing, thereby decreasing the output and increasing the price, if ever they have to consider this cost. So this is the graph that indicates the negative externality. So we have the original demand curve, okay, price and what we call quantity as usual, vertical and horizontal here. And then we have our original demand curve, which is MPP, marginal private benefit, and then original supply curve, which is a marginal private cost. And then after, the state intervened by imposing taxes on the on the production of the particular product because it's harmful in the society. And then the business will find it expensive to produce because the cost of production will be increasing for the firm. If the cost of production for the firm increases, what is going to happen? The firm will then produce less of this particular product while consumers are demanding relatively more. For that reason, that will be causing it will be causing the market failure. So the gap in between the two here, this distance here indicated by shaded area indicate what we call external cost or private cost or social cost, or it also indicate what we call the deadweight loss, in there, or social welfare loss, because it indicates that consumers demand more at Q, but they can only be getting less at the higher price. So this graph indicates what we call a negative externality. So the S1 indicates what we call the new supply curve, which indicates the decrease of goods produced by the firm and supplied by the firm, because it becomes more cost effective for it to produce to the government intervening by imposing more environmental taxes. So we call this what we call marginal social cost. This is social cost. The society have to pay an extra amount of money to afford this particular product and compromise the quantity that they will be able to afford because of the increase in cost. This is the graph being explained. DD is the original demand curve, for which all is also marginal private benefit, MPP. SS represents the marginal supply curve, which is also the marginal private cost. And then the intersection of DD and SS, it creates a point E, which is equilibrium point, and equilibrium quantity at Q, and as well as equilibrium price at P. The increase in tax on pollution increases the production cost for the business and result to the decrease in supply. Whenever the tax increases, the firm finds it expensive to produce this particular product. For that reason, it tends to do what? It tends to produce and surplus. That will result to the shift of supply from SS to S1, which is known to be marginal social cost. And then the new equilibrium is created at S1 and DD. That is reflected on Q1, which is the new quantity, and Q1, which is the new price. So the quantity has declined and the quantity has, the price has increased. Shaded area indicates the external cost or social cost or welfare loss or deadweight loss. Positive externalities, there we go. We have an example: education, libraries. The COVID-19 vaccination was a part of the positive externality. Positive externalities all contain the well-being of the society. They include goods such as education, healthcare, defense force, being vaccinated. And then also, if consumer of goods and services, if consumers of goods and services that yield positive externalities acknowledge the social benefit derived from them, they would increase their consumption, which will increase the demand. And then we continue. This is a graph indicating positive externalities. In this situation, we can have maybe the company coming into the area by upskilling people free of charge. Then those people get those skills and become marketable and employable. They get jobs, they earn income. That will mean that people of the area or their families will be better off because of what? Because of income earned by their children. For that reason, that will create a positive externality. It will lead to the increasing demand for goods and services. But firms will be supplying less because the supply remains constant while the demand for goods increases due to the increase in level of income. So we check original demand curve, marginal private benefit, and then original supply marginal. So marginal private cost. And then we have a equilibrium point, which is there, and the price as well as the Q. So after that, the increase in income earned by people after that lead to the shift of demand from D to D1, because as people get more income, they tend to demand more goods and services. Then we move to marginal social benefit. Society is now benefiting now because of the education and training that occurred to their children. For that reason, the shaded area become external benefit or social benefit or what we call welfare gain for the society. The graph is being explained in there. So original points are there. Then we start with what we call demand curve shift from D1 from DD to D1 because of the improve in skill acquisition as well as income earned by the people as they are now employed. The new equilibrium is created where on the intersection between D1 as well as SS. Remember, S supply remain constant at S, but the demand shift to the right and increase. Then point E is our new equilibrium with Q1 and Q1 shown in there. And then shaded area indicate what we call external benefits or social benefit or well increase in the level of income caused by people being skilled or upskilled in the community. Exam guideline and circular E21 possible essay discussing detailed state intervention as a consequence of market failure with or without graph. So this essay can come in two ways. They can say without graphs, discuss consequence of market failure, or they can say with the aid of graphs, discuss. So there are two ways of answering. So we have a direct control, imperfect markets, minimum wage, maximum price, taxes and subsidies, and then also subsidies on goods and services, income redistribution, as well as government involvement in production. These will be discussed in this presentation right now. Direct control, I did mention on this one that the state intervened by setting some laws, regulations, and bylaws to restrict the production of goods that are harmful in the society, such as demerit goods or goods that that lead to negative externalities, like the supply of some drugs is prohibited by the state through regulation, laws, and bylaws. The advertisement of alcohol is prohibited in some during some contextual context and sometimes some times like during maybe from 8 to 12, they don't advertise alcohol on radio, on TV, because that time is mainly for kids, so they cannot be exposed to alcohol. And then also cigarette is totally not advertised in South Africa because it will attract attention of wrong audiences. So to restrict overconsumption, the state legislate laws that directly limit business from making the provision of those goods and services. In South Africa, tobacco advertisement is prohibited. Tobacco producers are forced to make a provision of negative effect on the packaging of those particular products. So that's a part of regulation. Regulations for advertising exist to prevent false claims and deceptive advertising. We continue. Public awareness is made on alcohol as it is being restricted to be sold to persons under the age of 18, and they're also told not to drink and drive. That's a part of public awareness. And then motorists are not allowed to have a certain percentage of alcohol in their bodies while they are driving. Drinking and driving is prohibited. That's a part of preventing overconsumption of what we call of the alcohol as a part of demerit goods. Selling unprescribed and illegal drugs is prohibited. We are not allowed to sell the drugs that are illegal. For that reason, there is a creation of what we call the black markets. With regard to imperfect information, government require business to disclose information about their operations on the web page and also on the packaging of the product. In other instances, government require firm product to meet certain standards. e.g. cars must satisfy certain safety standards set by the government. So quality standards are important. They are set by the government through regulation so that goods can be they can mainly be acknowledged by the government to be allowed through SAPS. The SAPS regulates standards in South Africa. All firms must produce goods that will meet certain health, safety, and quality standards based on SAPS, Southern Bureau of Standards. Imperfect markets. Producers are motivated to maximize profit, which occur at the expense of consumers. So firms restrict output to increase their prices, use licensing and patents to restrict the entry of new businesses and limit competition, withhold information to maintain the market dominance, and use aggressive advertising to drive other competitors out of the market. That's a part of the imperfect market structure. Collusion by oligopoly reduce competition and keep prices high as competitors engage in price fixing, which then, if ever firms are colluding, there will be market dominance because of the cartel. And those firms that are not the part of that cartel will simply be dominated and they will not have much say and market share in the market. Monopolies lose their dominant position and market power solely to control the supply of the unique product. So without getting the product from the monopoly, you go without the product. That is because of the imperfect market. We continue. Government introduced what we call the Competition Policy Act of South Africa that we spoke about to promote health and fair competition within the economy. So it aims to, at prohibiting anti-competitive behavior or restrictive practices between competitors and firms and their consumer or suppliers. So it ensures that there's a fair competition within the economy. It promotes entry of new businesses, even smaller businesses in the market, allows even for marginalized people to participate freely in the economy, ensure that there's a market efficient. Those are some objectives of a Competition Policy Act of South Africa. And that was done by formulating three bodies of the competition, namely Competition Commission and then Competition Tribunal, as well as Commission Appeals Court, that are used to evaluate measures and investigate any alleged restrictive practice in the economy. Remember, Commission does primary investigation if the firm that has been alleged is guilty or not guilty, and pass those findings to whom? To Commission Tribunal. The tribunal will receive that information or findings and review them to investigate if they are really legit. Should the firm be found guilty, charges will be imposed on the firm and final penalty will be imposed by the Commission Tribunal. In case the firm is unhappy with the fine or penalty, it will then appeal on the Commission Appeals Court that function at the High Court of Competition in South Africa. Minimum wages. So if we talk of minimum wage, we refer to the lowest wage that no worker should be paid below in the country, in the particular industry. So when minimum wage has been legislated, no worker should be paid below a prescribed minimum wage. So if ever no worker should be paid about 3.5, or let's say if minimum wage is 3,500 under domestic workers, no worker should be paid below that amount of money. So in that situation, we have a minimum wage that have been put in place. The minimum wage is established by the government to prevent workers from being exploited by their employers, because it happens that employers pay workers relatively less income in a form of exploitation. So the government is trying to prevent that and also redistribute income fairly. It is the mechanism used to reduce economic inequalities that exist between economic participants. We know that some are rich, some are poor. So to reduce economic inequalities, there will be minimum wage put in place so that people can earn income that is along what we call the poverty line, or that is above the poverty line in the particular industries. Establishing of minimum wage result to poverty relief and decent standard of living. Remember, if ever the wage has been increased to be a little bit higher, there will be improvement of living standard and poverty relief for those people that are earning reasonable income. But there are some bad effects of minimum wage. It improves economic participation of marginalized and increased demand for goods and services. So people tend to demand more goods because of reasonable income that has been earned. State tax revenue also increase is affected positively because of the minimum wage. So direct spending by household will lead to government receiving more income in terms of what we call value-added tax. Domestic workers and farm workers are protected by these laws. Also, EPWP projects are also proclaimed a part of what we call minimum wages. Minimum wages have some negative effects, which include retrenchment and unemployment. If ever we impose minimum wage, that can lead to firms finding it more expensive to employ workers. So labor costs will be expensive or will be too high. For that reason, they demand less workers while there's more supply of workers in the economy. So there will be excess supply of labor and less demand for labor. To keep minimum wage law functional, the state intervened by providing what we call employment subsidies so that Even if firms are not able to afford to pay that 3,500, the state intervened by providing a certain amount of that particular wage. Then they can meet each other halfway so that workers can be paid and no one can be retrenched. So this is the graph that indicates minimum wage. So this is the market wage. Market wage is there at 2,000. You can see equilibrium point in there, meaning 30 workers will be demanded and be supplied at 2,000 rand. But should the state intervene by imposing minimum wage, which is 3,500, then if firm find it too expensive to employ workers, then that will lead to the retrenchment that is indicated by this point here. Workers were 30 that were supplied initially, but now only 20 workers are demanded by firms, while people that are willing to work are increasing from 20 to 60 now. I mean, from 30 to 60. People are motivated to work because they will be earning reasonable income. However, firms find it too expensive to employ workers. They employ relatively less, about 20 workers. That creates surplus in the market, labor surplus, because there will be oversupply of labor while less labor is demanded. The graphics explain SS, original supply, DT, original demand curve. The market wage is 2,000 rand, like I indicated there, along the market forces demand and supply. And the market quantity is 30 workers that are demanded at 2,000 rand. 30 is the number of labor that is employed, and then labor force employed. 3,500 is our minimum wage. There we have it up there. It's our minimum wage. And then 3,500 result in decline in quantity of labor demanded from 30 to 20. We can see it decreased from 30 to 20. While the quantity of labor supplied increased from 30 to 60, it goes to 60, meaning there are more workers that are motivated to work because they will be getting better salaries. However, the demand for labor is decreasing from 30 to 20. So the distance between C and D indicate the surplus of labor in the market. There's a labor surplus between this point C and B, or B and C. They indicate the gap in there indicate labor surplus, because the market can only afford to demand 20 workers. However, firms can demand 20 workers, but people that are willing to work are 60. So there's surplus of labor in the market that is unemployed, which is about 40. If you can say 60 minus 20, it's 40. So that's a surplus. Setting minimum prices. Remember, if we talk about minimum price, we are not talking about prices that are lower. We talk about prices that are higher. So be aware, we move indirectly. Minimum prices or price floor, which are set above the market equilibrium. They are said to be higher than equilibrium or market price. They are administered or set by the government to accommodate industry to produce goods that are very much important for the wellness of the society. E.g., the maize meal. Under farming, maize meal is a part of products that are benefiting through minimum prices or price floor, because they are trying to encourage producers to produce more of those goods because they are important for the wellness. To ensure food security, it is important for the state to encourage suppliers to supply more of those goods and services, and that will lead to what? Lead to more production. Farmers are mostly encouraged to keep their production high through minimum prices. Government intervene to ensure there is high enough quantities of basic foodstuffs such as maize by imposing or legislating or administering price floor or minimum prices. Minimum prices artificially increase the price of certain goods to keep suppliers within the market. They are encouraged to supply more if ever their prices are relatively high, because that will lead to them then having more revenues. This is the graph. So there are some effects of this nature. If ever we have what we call a minimum price, what normally happens? According to the market price, which is 100 rand, about 120 units are demanded. But should the state intervene by minimum prices, goods become relatively expensive to 150, and then consumers demand relatively less. While the market, according to the market, we demand 120, but because of the situation of minimum prices, we demand relatively less because goods are too much expensive for us. And then how much of supply is made by producers? They supply more along the supply at 200 units is supplied in this product. So they supply more, meaning there's oversupply of the product. So there's a market surplus while consumers are demanding less. So what is the effect of this? This can lead to goods becoming more, perishing if ever they are perishable, or it can lead to dumping, because if goods are about to perish or to expire, the country or the firms can sell them in the foreign country at the lower cost than the country of origin because of they want to waste them. Remember, dumping is prohibited by the World Trade Organization. This is the graph explained here. We have SS and DT as original points, and then wherever they intersect, we have equilibrium point, which is A. And then equilibrium price is 100. That's the market price, and equilibrium quantity is 120. So we demand 120 at the market price. However, 150 is a minimum price, and then 70 is the new quantity demanded. So the quantity demanded for workers decreased from 120 to 70. And then let's see, and then the what we call the supply increases to 200. You can see that the supply of this particular product increased to 200, meaning there will be oversupply of the product in this market because firms are encouraged to produce relatively more in this nature. Then the distance between point A and point B indicate surplus of maize. So there's oversupply of maize meal in this situation. Maximum prices. So those are prices that are set by the government to be below equilibrium so that people can afford those goods and services, as some people are marginalized. People with less disposable income face challenge because most of goods and services are out of their financial reach due to limited spending and expensive goods. The state therefore intervened to artificially decreasing prices of certain goods and services to make them affordable to consumers by legislating price ceilings or maximum prices. Basic goods such as electricity, water supply, housing, and paraffin are sold below the market price to and make them accessible or affordable to consumers because they are important for the wellness of the society. Maximum prices increase the demand for those, for those affected goods and services. So there will be more demand as people will then afford more. This reduces the poverty and economic inequalities. Maximum price increase the ability of marginalized people to participate in the economic mainstream because they tend to afford goods and services. And then maximum price discourages suppliers from making provision of those goods because they tend to be less profitable. For that reason, suppliers supply less of those goods, then the state intervenes by providing those goods as public goods and services. The supply of the product tends to be lower than the demanded product. Then this leads to the shortages of goods and services, then may lead to the formation of black markets. And then the state will then intervene by supplying those goods and services. Then we can see the supply and the demand originally. This is E and this is our market price, but then this is our what we call maximum price or price ceiling. It is below equilibrium. So on the market price, we afford 150 units. But should the state intervene by imposing what we call a maximum price or price ceiling, we demand about 200 units. However, firms are only willing to supply about 100 units. They supply less because the product becomes less profitable for them. For that reason, this portion from the point A to point B, the state will intervene and provide these goods as public goods and services so that welfare of the people can be met. SS original supply and DD original demand. 100 is our it's our equilibrium, equilibrium price, and then 150 is equilibrium quantity demanded at the market price. Point E is original equilibrium, where there is intersection between SS and DD. State intervening through maximum prices decrease the price of education from 100 to 50. For that reason, what happens? The market supply less while people are demanding more. The quantity of education supplied by the market decreases to 100, while the quantity demanded increases to 200 units. Access demand prevail. The distance between A and B indicates market shortages because the market will undersupply here. That's why we say there's a market shortage. Levying of taxes. So indirect taxes are levied on goods and services that have negative externalities to recover their external cost. The government discourages consumption of certain goods and services by increasing taxes on them to restrict their supply. So these goods compromise the social welfare, hence state intervention is required to reduce their consumption. Affected goods include cigarettes, alcohol, and sugar beverages. We can see cigarette, and then we have alcohol as well as sugar beverages. They're highly affected by levying high taxes on these goods to make them more expensive. So there is a graph in there. You can see original supply is here, original demand is here. And then this supply is before taxes, so it's before taxation was imposed. And then when the state intervened by imposing indirect taxes, such as environmental taxes or green taxes, the production become more expensive for this particular product. Then the firms tend to produce relatively less. They were producing at Q, but now they are producing at Q1, meaning the price has also increased to Q1. Then people tend to afford less of this particular product, but then their utility is not satisfied because on the equilibrium they demanded Q, but now they are forced to demand at Q1, which is relatively less. Then this is a part of the market failure because the product is then now undersupplied because of a cost of production is too cost effective for the producer, which deprive consumers from demanding this particular product since the government is willing to reduce the consumption or overconsumption of this particular product. Then we have our graph, and then we have original points, TDSS, and then equilibrium, and also the quantity indicated on our graph in there. And then let's check the increase in tax on the production cost on the production cost results to decrease in supply. We can see supply decreasing from S to S1, and then supply shift from to the left from to S1. The new equilibrium is created on the interaction of S1 to original demand curve. Q1 is the new equilibrium quantity, while P1 is the new equilibrium price. The decrease, this decreased consumption of affected goods and services as they become more expensive. You can see less consumption take place now because goods become relatively expensive. The effect of subsidies. So subsidies refer to financial aid given to producers to reduce their cost of production and make goods more affordable to consumers. Subsidies can be direct or indirect. So if we talk of direct subsidies, we refer to the cash or grant as a financial incentive given by the government to those businesses to produce more goods at the lower cost. Indirect subsidies include tax rebates or exemption, government surety, and other benefits that do not involve money in a form of cash that benefit the business to produce more goods at the lower cost. The introduction of a subsidy results in the increase in output produced, hence the increase in the supply for the product. So if ever the subsidy is in place, there will be more output produced and the consumers will then be benefiting because they will have produced. Then graph, the original points are indicated in there, and then supply shift from S to S1 indicating the increase in quantity of goods supplied, and then new equilibrium point is indicated at E1 where there's intersection between S1 and S1 as well as DD. The price decrease from P to P1, and the quantity demanded and produced increase from Q to Q1. Income redistribution. So the method of income redistribution are very important for the nation because we know that the market distribute income unfairly in the economy. So the gap between middle class and working class result to the government intervention to redistribute income and wealth so that marginalized people can be able to afford better living. South African government has introduced many ways of income distribution to combat poverty and redress imbalances of the past. The taxes, the South African government uses what we call a progressive tax system whereby high income earners are taxed more than low income earners, and that money benefit the underprivileged in the economy. So taxes is the main source of revenue for the state, which is used to redistribute income and wealth. Tax revenues are then used to, in the state extensive expenditure, which is documented on the national budget. State expenditure includes social transfers, social services, as well as infrastructure development. The state also created what we call EPWP, where they create job opportunities that are labor intensive in underprivileged areas where there's a high level of unemployment and poverty. Then we have redress methods. So redress measures have been continuously implemented by the government as part of economic transformation. This is done to ensure that economically excluded people are able to participate in the economic mainstream. So this talks to broad-based black economic empowerment, and then also it talks to what we call we call this thing land reform policies are also in place. Also, Employment Equity Act is also in place to ensure what we call affirmative action in the economy. And then we have a lot of ways of income redistribution, but now let's move because we're running out of time. State intervention in production public goods. Government is involved in production of public goods and services, such as collective goods as well as community goods. So it intervenes to produce those goods that are undersupplied by the market. And then they raise taxes to provide these goods and services. Income taxes, direct taxes, and wealth taxes are used to pay for such goods and services. Public goods, remember we talk about community goods that are provided free of charge. We talk about collective goods that are provided through user charges. The provision of some goods, of some other collective goods is subsidized. For example, water and electricity are highly subsidized. The government can also provide merit goods directly, for example, healthcare and education. Macroeconomic stability. So if the market are free and the objective of growth, employment, or let's say macroeconomic stability is not met, meaning it is unable to meet objectives such as full employment, economic growth, economic equity, price stability, and exchange rate stability, then there will be macroeconomic instability in that case. So the intervention focus on either the demand side or supply side policy, where the state can intervene by using fiscal policy and monetary policy to improve the aggregate demand for goods and services. And also on the supply side, the state can intervene by using some other measures that can increase the supply for goods and services in the market. Then we continue. I think this one has been mentioned. On the supply side, the state intervened by using some other measures like improving human resource development so that people can be marketable and also be employable, by also ensuring that efficiency of market and also efficient use of inputs So that's a part of what we call ensuring that factors of production are used effective and firms adapt to the new technology so that they can supply and produce more goods and services. Then we go to the CPA, the last part of our lesson, the cost benefit analysis. So it's a process of comparing cost and benefit for the particular project. The cost benefit analysis is a systematic process that is used to analyze which decisions can be made and which ones should be left aside. CPA is conducted based on net present value and net future value. If we talk about the net present value, we refer to situation whereby we consider only current inflation rate, current interest rate, as well as current exchange rate. But if we talk about the net future value, we refer to what? We refer to future exchange rate, future interest rate, as well as future inflation rate. For the project that will take longer period of time, whenever we analyze CPA, we use what we call the net future value, because inflation can change anytime, interest rate can change anytime. Also, exchange rate can also depreciate or appreciate as we go on. So for that reason, we use the projections or probabilities of these main aspects, which is inflation rate, interest rate, as well as exchange rate, so that we can estimate the future interest, the future inflation rate, as well as future exchange rate of the country. Why do we have CPA? CPA is conducted to evaluate the project if it's economically worthwhile or not. So it is important to make a proper decision that will benefit the economy and the society. It gives a glimpse of, if the investment has a worth or not, does not have any worth. So it gives us a clear picture if the cost of the project are more than the benefits, or benefits are more than the cost of the project. CPA is conducted to eliminate unmanageable social effects such as negative externalities. So if ever we don't do CPA, we might find ourselves conducting the project that will have even more negative externalities and be harmful in the society. If ever costs are more than benefits of the project cannot be undertaken, because that means it has more negative impact. CPA, cost benefit analysis, weight on the project cost and benefit of the project, measuring feasibility, since social costs should not exceed social benefits for the project to be undertaken. The cost benefit analysis, then we consider the private cost, private benefits, external costs, as well as external benefits. Remember, if we talk about private costs, there's the cost of building material, cost of labor, cost of water and electricity, external cost, pollution caused by the business, destruction on the environment, and the change of the landscape by the infrastructure. Disturbance of surroundings is a part of also external costs caused by the project. Private benefits, revenues received and subsidies received. External benefits, job opportunities, poverty relief, as well as employment opportunities, that are the part of external benefits. So for us to do such, we say private cost plus external cost, we get social cost, and then private benefit plus external benefit, we get what we call social benefits. Calculating CPA. So internal benefits are added into, to external benefits to determine the value of social benefits. Internal costs are added to external costs to get the value of social cost. The division between social benefits and social cost gives cost benefit ratio, which is CPR. Cost benefit ratio equals social benefit divided by social cost. So if CPR is CPR value is less than 1, or it can be less than 1, more than 1, and be equals to 1. So it can be like this, can be more than 1, can be less than 1, can be equal to 1. So let's check what happens, the effect. If CPR is greater than 1, the project is economically worthwhile, meaning social benefits are more than social costs, so it can continue in that situation. But if CPR is less than 1, that means social costs are more than social benefit. The project cannot continue because there are more negative effect than positive effect of the project. And then if CPR equals to 1, the project cannot continue. CPA must be conducted again in the near future to see if there is a change in cost or benefits of some sort. So it can be conducted again. It cannot be given a green light. This project, if CPR equal to 1, that means social benefit are equal to social cost. So the project is not economically worthwhile because the negative effect are equal to the positive effect. So destruction to be caused by the project is equal to the benefit to be caused by what we call the project. So these are concepts of CPA, private cost or internal costs that have been mentioned before, and then private benefits, and also external benefits. Then we have social costs and social benefits. They've been explained. This is simply the claims of assessments. Minimum wage. Why does implementation of minimum wage lead to unemployment? Remember, it can lead to unemployment because firms find it expensive to employ workers. Labor costs become more expensive or relatively high. Minimum wage leads to fewer jobs. The amount of labor is hired in the market decreases. Businesses are because of increased labor cost. If workers are paid more, employers will hire few of them. And then least workers, low-skilled workers, young people will be exposed to fewer jobs. Low-paying jobs requiring low skills are jobs likely to decline. And then workers have varying skills levels, and the minimum wage are likely to matter for higher skilled workers. Employment will substitute away from less skilled workers towards more skilled workers. Minimum wages can rise the unemployment by giving employers less incentive to hire because labor costs become relatively expensive, while there will be oversupply of labor. Employers are likely to reduce other benefits on the job training and fringe benefits. Few workers are employed. Employers substitute away from now more expensive labor and towards other inputs such as capital. Instead of employing labor is too expensive. They use machines so that they can cut costs of production so that they become more efficient. This is PPC. Identify the number of houses that can be produced at the market. And then what is depicted by point A, which is here, and then briefly describe the concept technical inefficiency, and then why point E is unnecessary, which is unattainable, and then how can the business increase the output of B without compromising or without the effect of Pareto inefficiency. Let's check in there. Identify the number of houses that can be produced, that 10,000. What is depicted by point A, allocative inefficiency, can also indicate productive inefficiency, because if we are here, consumers cannot be satisfied. Briefly describe the term technical inefficiency. It occurs when resources are not used appropriately to produce maximum number of goods and services at the lowest best quality or quantity. And then why is point E unnecessary? Point E is outside the PPC. It is not attainable, and as the firm is